Have you ever felt like your life was stuck in a holding pattern? Like every door you knocked on slammed shut in your face? Have you ever wondered if the pain you're enduring right now has any meaning at all? What if I told you there's a story so powerful, so dramatic, that it could completely shift how you see your darkest moments? This is the story of a man who went from the depths of an Egyptian dungeon to the heights of unimaginable power. A man forgotten by those he helped, abandoned by those he trusted, yet destined for something far greater than he could have ever imagined. His name was Joseph, and what happened to him in Genesis chapter 41 is nothing short of miraculous. But here's the twist. Before the palace came years of prison. Before the promotion came crushing rejection. And before the dream was fulfilled, it had to be completely shattered. So if you're in a season right now where nothing makes sense, where your gifts feel wasted and your potential feels buried, then you need to hear what happens next. Because Joseph's story isn't just ancient history, it's a mirror reflecting the very pattern God uses to prepare people for greatness. Drop a 777 in the comments if you're ready to see how God can turn your prison into a palace. And make sure you stick around until the end, because what unfolds in this chapter will blow your mind. Let's dive into one of the most dramatic reversals in all of Scripture. 2 full years had passed since Joseph interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker. 2 long years of silence, 2 years of waking up in that same prison cell, staring at the same stone walls, breathing the same stale air. Can you imagine what that must have felt like? The cupbearer had been restored to his position just as Joseph predicted, but he forgot all about the Hebrew slave who had given him hope. How many times do you think Joseph replayed that conversation in his mind? How many nights did he lie awake wondering if anyone remembered him at all? But something was stirring in the palace of Egypt, something that would change everything. Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the known world, began having dreams. Not ordinary dreams, but vivid, disturbing visions that shook him to his core. Night after night, these dreams invaded his sleep, and when he woke, a sense of dread hung over him like a dark cloud. He couldn't shake the feeling that these dreams meant something significant, something urgent. So Pharaoh did what any ruler of his time would do. He summoned every magician and wise man in Egypt. These were the elite, the educated, the spiritually connected. They knew the ancient arts, the secret interpretations, the hidden meanings behind symbols and visions. Pharaoh stood before them and recounted his dreams in detail, expecting answers, expecting clarity. But here's what's shocking. Not a single one of them could interpret the dreams. The silence in that throne room must have been deafening. All their training, all their wisdom, all their supposed connection to the gods. And they had nothing to offer. This is when the cupbearer finally remembered. It hit him like a lightning bolt. There was someone, a Hebrew prisoner, who had once interpreted his dream with perfect accuracy. Suddenly, the memory of Joseph came flooding back. The cupbearer approached Pharaoh with hesitation and said something like this: "I need to confess my faults today. When you were angry with your servants, you put me and the chief baker in prison. We both had dreams on the same night, and there was a young Hebrew man there, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams and he interpreted them for us. And everything happened exactly as he said it would. Can you feel the shift happening? After 2 years of being forgotten, Joseph's name was suddenly on the lips of Pharaoh's trusted servant. This wasn't luck. This wasn't coincidence. This was divine timing. Because God doesn't move according to our schedule. He moves according to his purpose. And sometimes the waiting is part of the preparation. Pharaoh wasted no time. He sent for Joseph immediately. But here's a detail that's easy to overlook. They didn't just drag Joseph out of the prison cell and throw him before Pharaoh. The text tells us that Joseph shaved and changed his clothes. Why does that matter? Because after years in prison, after being stripped of his dignity and his identity, Joseph was being restored. He was being made presentable, not just physically, but symbolically. This was the beginning of his transformation from prisoner to prince. Imagine Joseph standing there, freshly shaved, wearing clean clothes, walking through the corridors of Pharaoh's palace. His heart must have been pounding. What was happening? Why was he being summoned? Just hours earlier, he was rotting in a cell. Now he was about to stand before the most powerful ruler on earth. And when he entered that throne room, Pharaoh didn't waste any time with pleasantries. He cut straight to the point and said, "I have had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Now this is the moment where everything could have gone wrong. Joseph could have taken credit. He could have puffed himself up and said, 'Yes, I am gifted. I have special abilities,' but that's not what he did. Instead, Joseph's response reveals the very core of his character. He looked Pharaoh in the eye and said, 'It is not in me.' God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Do you see what just happened? Joseph deflected all glory away from himself and pointed it directly toward God. Even after years of suffering, even after being forgotten and abandoned, his faith had not wavered. He knew where his gift came from. He knew who was really in control. And this humility, this unshakable trust in God was about to unlock the door to his destiny. Pharaoh began to describe his dreams. He told Joseph about 7 healthy cows coming up out of the Nile, fat and sleek, grazing in the marshland. But then 7 other cows appeared, ugly and gaunt, so thin that Pharaoh said he had never seen anything like them in all of Egypt. And these sickly cows devoured the healthy ones. Yet even after eating them, they looked just as terrible as before. Then Pharaoh woke up. But when he fell asleep again, he had a second dream. This time, 7 heads of grain, plump and ripe, grew on a single stalk. But then 7 thin heads of grain, scorched by the east wind, sprouted up and swallowed the good grain. Pharaoh finished recounting his dreams and waited. The room was silent. Every eye was on Joseph. What would this Hebrew prisoner say? Could he really provide the answer that all the wise men of Egypt could not? Joseph stood there, feeling the weight of every gaze in that throne room pressing down on him. This was not just another conversation in a prison cell. This was Pharaoh. This was Egypt. This was the crossroads between remaining forgotten and stepping into purpose. And in that moment, Joseph did something remarkable. He didn't panic. He didn't hesitate. He didn't scramble for words or try to sound impressive. Instead, he listened. He absorbed every detail Pharaoh shared, and then he spoke with a clarity and confidence that could only come from one source: God himself. Joseph began by telling Pharaoh that both dreams were actually one message. They weren't random, they weren't meaningless. God was revealing to Pharaoh what he was about to do. The 7 healthy cows and the 7 full heads of grain represented 7 years of great abundance throughout all the land of Egypt. Prosperity like Egypt had never seen before. Harvests so plentiful that the land would overflow with grain. But then Joseph's tone shifted. The 7 ugly cows and the 7 scorched heads of grain represented 7 years of famine that would follow. A famine so severe that it would consume all the abundance of the previous years. And here's the chilling part. The famine would be so devastating that the time of plenty would be completely forgotten. It would be as if those good years had never existed. But Joseph didn't stop there. He went further. He told Pharaoh that the reason the dream was given twice in 2 different forms was because the matter was fixed by God. It was certain it was going to happen, and it was going to happen soon. Can you imagine the tension in that room? Pharaoh had just been told that his kingdom was about to experience both unimaginable wealth and unimaginable disaster. And the man delivering this message was a prisoner who had been rotting in a dungeon just hours before. Now here's where Joseph's wisdom truly shines. He didn't just interpret the dream and walk away. He offered a solution. He told Pharaoh to find a wise and discerning man and set him over the land of Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, this man should appoint officers to collect 1/5 of all the harvest and store it in the cities. That grain would serve as a reserve for the 7 years of famine so that the land would not perish. Joseph wasn't just a dreamer, he was a strategist, he was a leader, and Pharaoh saw it immediately. The plan was brilliant, it was practical. It was exactly what Egypt needed. And Pharaoh turned to his servants and asked a question that echoed through the halls of that palace. Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God? Nobody answered. Because the answer was obvious. There was no one like Joseph, not in Egypt, not anywhere. This wasn't just about interpreting dreams anymore. This was about recognizing divine appointment. Pharaoh saw something in Joseph that went beyond human ability. He saw the hand of God. Then Pharaoh did something that must have felt like a dream within a dream. He turned to Joseph and said words that would change the course of history. Since God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you. And then, in a moment dripping with symbolism and power, Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's hand. He clothed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He made him ride in the 2nd chariot, and they cried out before him, "Bow the knee." Let that sink in for a moment. Joseph, who had been a slave in Potiphar's house, who had been falsely accused and thrown into prison, who had been forgotten by the very man he helped, was now second in command over all of Egypt. In a single day he went from prisoner to prince, from dungeon to dynasty, from forgotten to famous. And he was only 30 years old. Joseph's story isn't just about dreams coming true, it's about what happens in the waiting. It's about the refining that takes place in the prison before the promotion in the palace. Every betrayal, every false accusation, every forgotten promise was shaping Joseph into the man Egypt needed him to be. So if you're in your prison season right now, if you feel buried and overlooked, remember this: God hasn't forgotten you. Your pain has purpose. Your waiting has meaning. And when your moment comes, it will come suddenly. One divine encounter can change everything. Until next time, keep trusting, keep believing, and remember that your palace is coming.